All right, everybody, moving right along to our second packed fast track session called New Opportunities. It's going to feature Dallas Jones, Henry Schuver, Pierce, Amber Vaughn, and Dave Kapturowski. Um, Executive Director Dallas Jones opens this fast track with an update radon mitigation inspector certification, followed by Henry Schuver as he discusses radon as surrogate for soil gas and CVI. Tony Pierce shares radon testing in public schools. Amber Vaughn discusses the homebuyer notification policy. And Dave Kapturowski shares updates regarding Appendix F of the RRNC testing and mitigation standard. Welcome, everyone. All right, Dallas, it's coming right back to you. The virtual stage is yours, so take it away.
Dallas, you're muted.
Do we need to go over to the agenda and click on that? Or
Yes.
We might need to do that.
Okay, all right. So we all need to go down to the Hoover agenda and click on the next session, correct? All
Yes.
right, I'm going to do that now. And
Except for my panelists, you don't have to worry about that.
okay, so I don't need to move. Thank you. So I mentioned yesterday in one of the sessions about the radon mitigation inspector, actually we're calling it compliance inspector certification that we are in the midst of working on. Earlier in the year, we convened a job task analysis committee who went through the standards for radon mitigation, including the items that were being harmonized at the time from the different standards related to mitigation, and put together the job tasks, the domains, the subdomains, and the knowledge statements in preparation for an exam. Of course, one of the bigger challenges of this particular exercise was to also come up with a mitigation compliance checklist. And that checklist started with a number of existing checklists from various state radon programs and from ASHE. And so we looked at all the different ones that were available, and the committee began to put together a consensus on what would be the best checklist. And so that was accomplished. That checklist has been put into an online form, and so it's ready for use. And we're going to test that checklist with the project that we discussed yesterday with Paul Crevens from the state of Indiana, as we have some, what would be some preliminary mitigation inspection or compliance inspection. People go out and do these inspections for the state of Indiana. And so as we go through that project, we'll work out any kinks in the process, hopefully. And we should be in a position, working with the Certification Council, to be able to roll out a certification in 2021. After we complete at least some portion of that project in Indiana. So as opportunities go, this is something that if you've gone through measurement training, you did have to take some mitigation training as part of that. And so there will be a course that the training providers can provide. So we have to get that sent out to the different course providers where they can see what the domains and subdomains consist of. And so there are some inspection courses out there now that can be modified to go with the new job skills analysis. And so keep an eye on this. We hope to have more news on it shortly after the first of the year. That's it for me. Who's next?
All right. Well, next up is Henry Schuver.
Well, hello and thank you, everyone. See if I can share my screen here. And we want to congratulate everyone on the smooth virtual symposium so far. Impressive. Can you see my screen now?
We cannot.
We just see gray, Henry.
That's
Yes.
not good. That's not good. Let me try again here. How's
Here
that?
it comes. Yep, it's loading.
See if
Here we go.
can you
Perfect.
in presentation mode, you see a little better there. We have a long title. It was shortened appropriately for the introduction. Thank you.
If you go up to your top menu and click slideshow. Nope, one lower.
Oops.
One lower. There you go. All right, perfect. Looks great.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have a long title here. We're essentially trying to use radon as a quantitative surrogate, testing of that relationship anyway, for chemical vapor intrusion and assessments, improving the confidence in the assessments. So we're encouraging measurements, and this work presented here today is based on a paper that's been submitted to Groundwater Monitoring and Remediation Journal, and this is our key authors from our team here. And for background, I don't have a lot of time here. For background, I will just refer you to our website with our workshop from the last spring that gives much more detail on this, but the interpretation wasn't as far advanced as we hope we be able to share with you today. But essentially, there's two components to soil gas that we have a common enemy, if you will, hazards in soil gas that ends up in indoor air and harms health. So radon, we have this no threshold concept and fairly high level risk-wise compared to chemicals as a reference level. But chemicals is generally concerned much lower. In fact, if you put it in the same units, 1/1000th of a microgram per liter is a very low number concentration-wise. But that is the concern for, according to our Office of Research and Development, some of these chemicals can in fact be developmental toxicants, and there's some good evidence for heart defects and other malformations and birth defects of various types. But the idea is that exposures as short as 1 day could be important, and that's a key for our assessment needs. We're trying to find peak concentrations, and that's what we're using frequent measurements of radon to focus in on the times when intrusion is the highest. So there's big similarities. They travel together, chemicals and radon, of course, both in soil gas carried inside, mixing indoor air, and retention, all very similar in many ways. Solution to the problem is the same, of course, for both contaminants, and that is to keep the soil gas out of the indoor air, be soil gas safe, if you will. And some differences, a number of complex differences we'll get to in the future and better understand. But right now we're moving on for the sake of time. Essentially, based on our studies up until recently, we had 2 in-depth studies of radon highly correlated with concentrations of chemicals from vapor intrusion in 2 buildings. And it was essentially semi-quantitative because correlation was strictly on the direction of concentration change, not on the actual magnitude of concentration change, which is what we're struggling with in today's discussion. But this was a 99 and 99.9% correlation in these 2 buildings, so highly correlated. So current testing, we're now looking at trying to make quantitative in the actual magnitude of change through time in 3 new buildings. So in additional studies on those, the first 2 buildings in EPA's Indiana duplex, and then Sun Devil Manor in Utah, Arizona State University building. So this is how we did the analysis. Essentially, is what we did is we normalized all of the different units of measurement. There's a number of temperature, pressure, and radon. We're looking at the key players of trying to some low-cost measurements we can do frequently and make a understanding of what's the behavior of soil gas entering these buildings. And so the idea is that we would use a baseline measurement of some near number of months, hopefully close to up to a year would be great, but the number of baseline observations, and then plot that distribution of the concentrations or the measurements in various factors over time and plot it as a percentile, normalized all the different units into percentiles. In this case, for example, we would have the temperature measurements during the time of observation of chemicals, and we have this many events, and 26 of them are above the 95th percentile. Those are the peaks we're interested in looking at for chemical concentrations. And we'll see the relationship between the various metrics, in this case, temperature of outdoor air relative to that. And so the next step is to compare it to our table of what are the PCE in this case was 97 percentile at this time, at this date, and it was only temperature was down here. So there's not a good relationship between these two events. We'd like to see if they were directly correlated. We'd like to see very similar to the same percentile. So that's just how the study worked here. We looked at the relationship in percentiles between a indicator compound, metric measurement, and a chemical concentration at an event above the 95th percentile of peak concentration. Chemicals, for chemicals, we use the term reasonable maximum exposure of concern, and that would be above the 90 averages, essentially just a short range between 92 and 98 percentile. So we just use the center point of 95th percentile for this purpose. So in this case, this is a new building that many of you may not have seen yet. This is Virginia Site A, we call it. And this is within a large industrial building. One building built within it is a supply room. And this supply room has a number of, we measured a number of things there. Indoor air, TCE is in the red on the chart. The summary chart includes all of the measurements. It's a bit complicated. We'll get there in a minute, but the individual broken down measurements, soil gas, TCE in subslab concentrations, and soil gas, outdoor air, differential temperature, wind speed, barometric pressure, differential pressure, and the indoor radon. And in the summary of all the different curves here together, we'll try to point out some of the important ones. Of course, the red one is the true concentration of chemicals we're most interested in indoor air. And in this case, radon, indoor radon is in this purplish, light purple line here, which in many ways follows the rise and fall in concentrations of chemicals, but is a little bit overpredictive in these early days. These are days before the 95th percentile peak in chemicals, but matches up almost exactly during the peak event. So they're both in their 95th percentile or higher concentrations of their range over, in this case, 9 months of observations, and including a spring, summer, fall of this year. Didn't include the winter yet. We have the data now, but not yet for this study, not yet wrapped into this paper. But the idea is that we're trying to correlate this. Another one, actually internal for chemical people, it's interesting. Subslab concentration is often assumed to be an indicator of what's indoor air. And the opposite is actually observed here. When the indoor air goes up in concentration through time, it falls in the subslab, which makes some conservation mass sense. But anyway, it's opposite of the current hypothesis and understanding on chemical behaviors and the way we can make decisions. Many people only use subslab concentrations to make decisions, no indoor air. So anyway, here, this is in the same building again, but this is the women's restroom. It's substantially different than the other supply room in that it has a much higher air exchange rate, intentionally designed for the restroom kind of situations. And most of the TCE concentrations in this indoor air is non-detect, which is this horizontal line, and then it peaks up in the later point here. And some of the things we will see here, the radon is not well correlated. I mean, it's rising, but not anywhere near the same percentile as chemicals is in this situation. So in this particular building with higher air exchange, it doesn't seem to be as well correlated, substantially reduced. Other factors that may be of interest is, again, the subslab concentration is going down when the indoor air is going up. And this is interesting. Wind speed seems to be inversely related to the retention of the chemicals indoor air. So it's interpreted to be a fairly leaky building anyway. So that's one way to look at it. This next site is Moffett Field. This was done some years ago, but unfortunately no radon was included here. But what was interesting to me was indoor air DCE and TCE were both included. And you can see the two chemicals from essentially the same source were not exactly the same either. So it led to some thought about how accurate these indicators, which are not necessarily even directly related in the same location, would not necessarily be much better than two chemicals which are thought to be from the same source. So anyway, outdoor temperature is a little bit opposite of normal sites in this case, but it is a Mediterranean, it's San Francisco area, and the winds are probably more important than the temperature in this case, because there's not that much temperature change there. But anyway, Next site is Sun Devil Manor. Many of you may have heard of this one. And this is a case where the chemical is somewhat moderate around the median range here for much of the 3 to 4 days, and the 5th day shoots right up to this peak event. And the temperature, the outdoor temperature here in purple is a differential temperature. I'm sure it's the highest actually. It's way over predicting the indoor air concentrations, but driving it, if you will, heading in that direction. The radon in the purple here is somewhat imitating the rise and fall of the chemicals in and out, similarly pumping, but the peaks up very, very close at the peak there. And that was one of the ones that we had studied earlier. But anyway, these other metrics are similarly related. This differential pressure was one of about 6 different locations in the building, and this is the best one that they had. And you would never know that until you did them all and studied it afterwards. But anyway, it shows some relationship of fairly good relationship, not exactly the same, but fairly good relationship. Again, this is 23 months, almost 2 years of study in that building. And so all 4 seasons twice in that case. This the next building here is the EPA's Indiana duplex in Indianapolis, Indiana. This is in the basement itself, and the chemical rising up to the peak events. These are the statistics down here. These are the number of observations, the number of peaks. We're above the 95th percentile was 26, and this representing this point here. It's the median of those 26 points. And the idea is that a lot of things are going here very close to here, and what very close to in this case are a long part of the pathway here is inverse temperature. That is, it's colder outside, and differential temperature are positively related. And these two are very close to the observed chemical. And the case is radon in this case, again, is quite a bit lower off of the peak in many ways. So there's many places where radon's much higher when it wasn't a high chemical result. So this is, again, the basement. The basement's a little hard to understand. It's a little complicated. So then we go to the first floor here of this building. Actually, the measurement of radon was on the 2nd floor, but it was essentially similar. So it was the living space was, no one was living in the basement much of the time, but the idea is that the occupied building is the 1st and 2nd floors. But the idea here is we have the chemical rate going this way, and essentially the radon in this case is from the 2nd floor again. But it is actually the next closest relationship over the last day there. Peak concentration is not quite at this 95th, although the chemical is, but it is a good indicator or correlated to the, well correlated to the chemicals in this building, this portion of the building living space. There's some other things, a lot of things going on here. I can't even interpret them all right now, but this was an odd one here. I have to confirm with my team, but it sure looks like this one is underfloor soil temperature, which is a disturbing relationship that we only saw meaningfully applied in another case I don't have a slide from in Fairbanks, Alaska. The chemical concentrations were highest in the summer in indoor air, which is the opposite of most scenarios, but that is a conceptual site model, which is completely different than most of the places. And of course, they didn't measure in winter in Fairbanks, Alaska for some reason. But anyway, here's some observations that could be considered given a little bit of time here. Contrary to current understanding, chemical vapor intrusion, the subslab is inversely correlated for 2 different buildings within this Virginia Site A, decreasing indoor air concentrations when the indoor air are increasing, the subslab is decreasing, mass transfer probably. So the correlations in similar chemicals are not exact. We saw that in Moffett Field there. And the idea is that using the same attenuation factor across chemicals for precise, close to unacceptable risk decisions, which is common, fairly common in the
Excuse
real
me,
world,
Henry.
doesn't
You have
seem to be
1 minute.
Yes.
You have 1 minute.
1 minute will be. It will be. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you.
Okay, so, yep. And so the idea is we should not expect these metrics, which are not as closely related as other chemicals from the same release, to be as exact. And so they may never be a surrogate. That's an observation. Radon, and in this case, is highly confident quantitative, semi-quantitative tracer of the direction of change. We saw that earlier, and we saw more of that in this further study in more buildings. But what we have so far is in regards to heading to a peak concentration as a percentile of the distribution of observation from building, visually confident predictor of the peak concentrations in many buildings, not all of them. This is not likely to be a surrogate, but a very useful indicator. And the idea is its relationships are scenario specific at this point, conceptual site model specific, requires a baseline of ongoing measurements of, for example, frequent radon measurements collected in between typically infrequent chemical sampling. least at this time, until we know more and might have more relationships. That's it. Thank you.
All right, Henry, thank you so much. We truly appreciate it.
Okay.
All right, next up we have Tony Pierce. All right, Tony, turning the virtual floor to you.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can.
All right. Let's share my screen here real quick. And see that
Looks
okay?
good. Yep. Go ahead and start your slideshow.
Okay. All right. So I am Tony Pierce. I'm the new Radon Program Manager for the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services. And one thing I'd like to get out of the audience today is a little input. We're kind of at a transition point in our program, and we have a lot of data. So one thing I want to ask of the audience is, if you had 15 years of school testing data, what would you do with it? Or for those with established programs, what have you done with it? So feel free to send that through either the chat or to my email here, and we'll keep going here. So why did we look at schools? You know, it goes back to EPA's initial studies in '89 and '91, and doing the math. You know, there's a lot of kiddos that occupies over 70,000 classrooms, and if there are radon issues, they're all exposed. So let's take a look at here in Missouri and see what our risks are. And we started our program testing schools in 2004-ish, and we've been testing public schools since then. Initially, we started using the EPA guidelines, and those have evolved a little bit over time to incorporate the new best practices. The big key is kind of within this, you know, schools are a special critter. If you haven't ever worked with the school before, it's not like working with a homeowner or even a property owner at a rental unit. You've got district level people you have to communicate with. You have building level people, the individual teachers in the classrooms, the parents, the community members, PTAs, PTOs, all of that wraps into this beautiful little flower here of organizing, communicating, and planning. And the biggest issue is making sure you talk to the right person at the right time, and keep that in mind as you're communicating your plans, as you plan to go on site, while you're on site, and of course afterwards, so that you can get those reports to the right people. You know, there again, placing the tests in schools is a little different than just stopping by somebody's house and putting one in. It's easy to get kids distracted, but it's also a good educational opportunity. So some of the kids
We lost him? Hello?
Yeah, I think we did.
I think so.
Okay, I don't have his slides.
Okay.
We don't have Tony's slides. Hopefully he'll pop back on.
All right, are you back?
Yes,
We
you're
are,
back.
you are too.
Okay.
We were
All right.
worried.
Oh, well, the weather decided to get a little bit exciting here.
Okay,
just
let's
as
see if
were-
we can get you screen sharing again.
Yes, let's do that. Let's see.
Is your area one of the ones in the storm?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a few people having some issues because of the storm.
So let's.
Do you want me to
Get
check
back.
something on Schuver?
No, never mind.
No, his, there you go. It's back up.
All right.
Tony, it's back up. All right. And
All right.
Nicole, we can hear you and Marilyn.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. All right, Tony, continue, please. Thank you.
All right. So here's a graphic that shows. Let's see here. This graphic kind of shows one thing to consider when you're testing a school. Using CRMs, it's obvious to tell when they're in session, when the doors are open, when the doors are closed, and most importantly, here you can see on the weekend what happens after they shut the HVAC systems off. The radon levels just climb, and then they open back up for school and it drops down. So as you're testing schools, you know, there's different things to consider. Do you want the worst case scenario, which in this case would be school classroom closed up for the weekend with the HVAC turned off? Or do you want your normal, your real-time exposure risk to those students? And that's kind of a discussion that we have with the districts whenever we place those tests. We were hoping to have a little better information on that here with our tests that we had put out during the spring closures due to COVID, but most of those fortunately came back at lower levels, so we didn't get these big spikes like this. And here's a let's see here, where are we?
Tony, can you hear us?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. We lost your screen again.
Oh. All right. Let's try this again. All right. Is that back?
It's loading. There you go.
There we go. All right. So here's some of our data that we've had over the last few years. We've done a lot of classrooms. We've got a lot of data sets. You know, the downside is that we don't really have a lot of information on mitigation because Missouri does not require mitigation reporting, and so we kind of have to keep those lines of communication open and hope for the best. And we have some that we communicate good with, and some that once they get it squared away, they're done with us and don't really respond anymore. And then, of course, there's also the issues with school personnel turnover. So, you know, there again, communication is key to success for some of these. You know, just to kind of go back over a few things here. The communication step is always important, no matter what a government agency is trying to do that involves the public. But when you're dealing with schools and kids and parents, it's especially important. The big thing, whatever protocols you use, stick to it. It doesn't do your data any good if you test each school differently. Kind of same thing holds true with home testing. You know, if you're doing it different every time, your data just has too many variables in there. And there's a big difference between in-session testing and closed schools. So keep that in mind, depending on what your plan is, if you want worst case scenario or if you want that normal situation. And of course, the biggest thing in there from the beginning is planning. You know, how big is the school? How far are you going to be traveling? Are you going to use short or long-term detectors? Are you going to place CRMs out everywhere? All those things play into that planning process and inconveniencing those schools. Here's a couple resources that we used. Of course, Kansas State being our neighbor here just across the border was a big help in a lot of the things that we've done over the last few years in our radon program. So big thanks to them.
I think you might need to change slides.
So, all right, let's see here. So this one, and then that is all I've got for you. So we will share these slides again and get back with you guys. Let me know if you have any questions. And again, I do look forward to hearing your plans for what we could do with our data, because we do have a lot of data out there. So definitely would appreciate any new ideas. So thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Tony. All right, next up is Amber Vaughn.
Hi,
Hi.
Vaughn.
Time no see.
Hi, yes, good to see you again.
You too. All right, take it away.
Okay, let's get this up. Okay. All right, so hi everyone. My name is Amber Vaughn, and I'm a doctoral student from the Colorado School of Public Health. And I'm going to be talking to you today about homebuyer notification policy, getting the insight into some of the practical components of it. First, I want to start by thanking all the participants in my study for their time and insights, and thanking Jane Malone, Katie Lowe Miller, and Kathy James for the help in developing and guidance through this process. Homebuyer awareness radon policy in the Act, it's not enacted in all states. And so it's really important to look into what it does and what it means. And so with this Act, there's a great opportunity to get a point in contact to reach people where during real estate transactions. So realtors provide radon warning statements to home buyers with the goal to increase awareness so that people have the choice to test. What I've done over the past couple of months is interview a whole bunch of people from different professions and across multiple states, as you can see within the map below, and try to find different themes that come up about how the policy was passed, what makes it effective, and potential ways that it can expand in the future. What I found is that the really key component is having an advocate. This can be a public health advocate. This can be a citizen advocate who has been personally affected by radon-induced lung cancer, or a family member who has been. It can be a radon professional or technician. It could be a medical student or a law student, really anyone who's really passionate about radon. And then they go and get legislator support. And it's really important that it's bipartisan to help push the Radon Act through. And then kind of behind the scenes, there's a lot more going on where there needs to be collaboration between the radon program and realtors, because they can really help inform and provide guidance to, one, what is feasible, and two, how they can help support the program once it's actually implemented. And some keys to success are, one, have a step process. Don't try to do your whole thing at once. Find what's the lowest hanging fruit, and then work your way over time to a more mature process and to what you want the goal to be. Another is having it be budget neutral, not costing the taxpayers anything. That really helps legislator gain support behind this act. And then also no mandates, because mandates equal money. And so having it mature over time really helps if that is the ultimate goal. And then having certification laws. And this is really important because when you have increased awareness, you're also going to have increased demand. And realtors need people who they can trust and rely on to provide quality mitigation systems to the home buyers to ensure that they're getting the risk protection that they do want. This is an example of a radon warning statement from Minnesota. As you can see, it's a separate piece of paper. They have a really outlined and bolded radon warning statement talking about lung cancer. Radon can cause lung cancer. And so that can really bring the attention to the home buyers and asking questions about what radon is and start getting them curious about it. This is an example from New Hampshire. And as you can see, it's not its own sheet of paper. There's a couple other components in it. And then this is the radon warning statement. It's much less apparent, and it just talks about radon's presence as opposed to the health risks involved with radon. Looking into the language of the law or regulation, you can see that there's a lot of differences across states. Some states like giving out an information pamphlet, and this tells them about what radon is, where it comes from, the health risks from it. all of the states have the radon warning statement in the purchase and sale agreement. Some provide it in a separate sheet of paper, so it can really bring forth awareness. Some state lung cancer, some state health risks within the warning statement, and others state just that there's radon can be in the home. Some have signatures involved, and this can be from the home buyer, the home seller, or with Illinois, they have it as part of the realtor as well, providing signature. Other states have initials involved. And then there's also disclosure of results to provide the greatest amount of accuracy. Some sellers provide the lab report. And this is really helpful because you can get the accuracy of what it was and when it was actually tested. Some states, it's optional. And then other states have a seller report it, what they recall it happening. Minnesota has it high and low. And then other states have it where they actually try to recall the specific level, which can be difficult to have accuracy in the results because if it was tested last time the home was bought or sold, that could be 5, 10, 20 years ago. And it makes it a little harder to know exactly what it was. So with this policy, it's not just having it be passed, but also what is the support for success? And really what it comes down to, a lot of it, is the state radon program. They provide educational support, expertise, unbiased opinion, pamphlet design. They're the ones who are fielding the calls for people who are trying to get information about radon. They also really are involved with the outreach and education. They're the ones who can reach out to realtors and help spread the awareness. And then there's a continuing education component where the state radon program or radon professionals can provide education to realtors where realtors have the requirement to have continuing education, and then radon fulfilling one of those requirements. What's really good motivational factor is that if it can be free and the state radon programs can travel to areas close to them, that really helps increase the participation of realtors to attend these courses. And then the main thing with continuing education is that it helps increase realtor awareness and also risk perception. So then they can then pass it on to the home buyers and sellers, because the home buyers and sellers may ask, is this something that I really need to test for? Is radon something I need? And the realtor can, say yes. It's an opportunity for them to say, yes, I would do this if it was me. If you're going to spend any time, in the house or in the basement, I would definitely do it. And then it becomes a standard practice having this disclosure within the real estate process. And after interviewing some realtors, they said there's really no negative effect to their practice. And then also having a consumer protection piece of it. Again, having that relationship and that support and partnership between the realtors and the contractors or the radon professionals, so they have someone they can go to and know that their clients are getting quality products and mitigations installed in their home. And this comes back with having certified testers and mitigators and having that law enacted. So to summarize what I've gone through so far, not all states have radon disclosures in real estate transactions. Realtors are the contact point to provide radon warning statements and other disclosure documents. For passage, it's really important to have an advocate of some sort because the state government can't advocate for radon. They're the expertise, they're unbiased. They need someone else doing the legwork. Having partnerships really helps find what's feasible for your state, and then having legislature support to push it along. For efficacy, the Radon Act needs to have a radon disclosure on a separate piece of paper to really bring out what radon is and its health risks. And having the warning statement indicate that radon can cause lung cancer helps prompt questions for home buyers. And then having support for long-term support through radon program partnerships, continuing education for realtors, and consumer protection of the testing results and mitigation that's being installed. Now to go into some things that may not be feasible at the moment, but we can look for in the future. So additional policy possibilities. Some policy components can include having a radon mitigation system being a selling point. So prior to a home being listed for sale, the seller can test their home and have a quality mitigation system put in, and then they can really advertise that to help their home sell better. talk early about radon between the realtor and the home seller and the home buyer to get that conversation started. And then also required to ask, do you want to test the home for radon during a home inspection? And this is so that they can really think about what radon is and again, bring up their attention that I need to make a decision on radon. Some areas for policy expansion. Pretty much everyone in the ideal world would want mandatory testing. It's a little easier said than done, but having that testing so that all houses get that radon awareness out. And then also having rental protections. Iowa City, Iowa has this passed in their city. It's not implemented until 2021, but they do have it passed. And then looking at new builds and having them test as well, because with new builds, you don't have a prior owner to have that disclosure to share to the new home buyer. So by incorporating current homes, rental protections, and new buildings, really trying to get as much of the housing stock as possible to increase the awareness and increase protection for families all across the United States. And so I would like to end with this. It's like people are at risk from radon. Can we just pass this legislation to protect them? And the answer is no, not in the way we do business, not the way we do legislation. And this is from a radon mitigator. And this is so important because it really shows that just because something should be done doesn't mean it's so easy. And understanding these policy components can help provide an effective avenue and path to get this protection that we really desire to have. And so I want to thank you all for listening to my talk. This is my contact information. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to let me know. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amber. We really appreciate it and really enjoying your research. So I definitely hope we're going to hear a lot more from you in the future. So I look forward to seeing you again out there in Colorado.
Yeah, thank you, Don.
All right. Up next, and last but not least, is Dave Kapturowski. All right, Dave, are you ready to come on board? All right, it's all.
I am. This is Dave Kay here, coming to you from beautiful Bucks County, Pennsylvania, which is north of Philadelphia. Get my slideshow going here. And what I'd like to do is give you an update on the International Residential Code, which is a national building code, Appendix F, updates which include radon testing and mitigation. Radon and building codes, there's no mandatory requirement in the body of the International Residential Code. We actually made a couple of attempts to try to put radon in the body of the code, and we're not successful with that. And we've actually been working on this as a project for the past 10 years. And it was just last year, or actually this year, where we were able to make some adjustments in Appendix F, which has been in existence for about 25 years or so. RRNC, which is new construction in Appendix F, is optionally added by jurisdiction. Okay, and so that jurisdiction could be state level, county level, or even down to a municipality. And it's either based on the EPA zone map, or there is a provision that locally available data can be used for adoption. And testing was not required before the 2021 version. But what I like to do is go through the actual language that was added into Appendix F. Now, the ICC, which is the Code Council, did not allow us to reference simply our existing protocols. They thought that, especially the version that was available at the time, was too permissive, meaning that there was not a solid set of requirements. There was guidance and things that you should do or might want to consider. But the building code is actually law. And so by law, it has to be enforceable, which means that it would contain mandatory language, and that would be shall. You shall do this, you shall do that. So this is the language that was added in Appendix F. Where radon resisting construction is required, radon testing shall be as specified in items 1 through 11. Number 1, okay, the testing shall be done after. So if you're doing the quiz, there might be a clue there as to what the answer, true or false, is on that. So energy codes now require that a blower door test be done. In order for the blower door test to be done, all the doors and windows have to be in place, and largely you have a sealed building shell. Item 2, both the radon control system and the HVAC systems are to be complete. The HVAC system has to be operational and running during the test. And if there's an active system, meaning that the radon fan was installed, the builder made that choice, then that radon fan should be operating during the test.
Excuse me, Dave. Were you
Yes.
going to screen share slides?
I'm not.
No, sorry. They're not up. It didn't look like you were trying to wrangle slides, so we just noticed. We're like, wait a minute. Slides will be available after. It's loading. There we go. Thank you.
Okay, let me do catch up here. We were going through, this is the actual language which is contained in the code. So we went through these first 2 items. Number 3, the testing shall be performed in the lowest occupied floor level, even if that space is not finished. And additionally, if it's a large home and there are multiple HVAC systems, then they should be tested separately. Number 4 tells you where not to do the test in places of high humidity or where there's limited airflow or perhaps excessive airflow as there would be in a stairway. The testing shall be either performed with a commercially available radon test kit or performed by an approved third party with a continuous radon monitor. And this is language which is used, throughout the code. It's up to local jurisdictions to provide approval for what someone may or may not do. So in terms of if you were an electrician, that would be done legislatively to provide you. So we have a number of states that are either licensed or certified, so that would allow that person to do testing with a continuous radon monitor. If test kits are used, it'll be a duplicate side-by-side test, and the results will be averaged. Now, number 6 is closed house conditions. So all the doors and windows should be closed and at least 12 hours prior to testing. Number 7, the testing can be performed by the builder, a registered design professional, which is the only defined person in the building codes. And that's generally an architect, and they're not going to get involved in radon testing. And again, by an approved third party. Number 8, the testing it's a 2-day test, or if they wanted to do a long-term test, that also is available and it can be done, but 48 hours would be the minimum. Number 9, the test result, and the test result has to be below 4 picocuries per liter. The final written report will be given to the local code official. Number 10, when the result is 4 picocuries or greater, then the system needs to be activated. And 11 calls for a retest afterwards. And it is not until results show below 4 picocuries, okay, that you can give the results to the code official and be done. So this is just a summary of what these items are. Okay, that number 1, the testing shall be performed after the blower door test, after the HVAC systems are installed. Different HVAC systems should be tested separately. They should be tested under closed house conditions. Testing can be performed by a builder, a design professional, or an approved third party, not less than 2 days. And the test results have to be given to the code official, and the result must be less than 4 picocuries. If it exceeds 4 picocuries, then it has to be activated and retested. So this is our team. We were out in Las Vegas, and I want to give especially thanks to Josh Kerber and Kim Steves from CRCPD, who were part of the group, Don Savigny, who is a Minnesota building code official. He testified with us. Myself, Gary Hodgson, Jay Malone were there from ARST, Craig Connor from the EPA. And again, acknowledgement to Tommy Bowles from the EPA, Bruce Sneed, and Bill Angel for some of the advanced work that was done to get a successful change in the building code. Last item here, I just wanted to mention, because it was also part of the same code hearing, is the sidewall venting proposal, which would have meant fans installed in the basement and venting at the band joist. We were successful in defeating that proposal. So that's it.
All right, Dave, thank you so much for that. Okay, to bring all of our panelists back, we're going to do a little Q&A. So if everybody wants to pop back on, and Jane, will you be moderating?
Yes, sure. So far I've got 5 questions. We'll see if we can get through them. First for Henry, from Leo, closed or variable open conditions, and how do you expect it to change your data?
Jane, why don't you pass to the next question, because Henry dropped off. Let me see if I can pull him back in from the attendees.
Okay. So it looks like we have just 7 minutes or so here. The next question is for Amber. Does the policy efficacy have a component that has a regulatory component that the regulatory bodies are held to?
So from my understanding, so it varies from state to state, but the regulatory component is typically based on the real estate association. So they're the ones who make sure that the contracts are there. Pretty much the realtors say it's all standard. They have the documents, they have the contracts, and it's just another piece of paper that they go through on the documents. Some states audit the documents or have that audit. Doesn't happen very often, but they are held to having that component being regulated. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. And another question for you, Amber. Are you saying in all states the realtor is required to provide a radon warning statement?
No, not in all states. It's just in the states that have the home buyer awareness radon policy enacted. And I showed 9 of those states.
Okay. And the next question is for Dave K. The word approved in the code means acceptable to the authority having jurisdiction. And then AHJ is the local building official, etc. I'm not sure the question, looking for clarification there, I think, Dave.
Yes, the state law will always supersede the building code. So if you're in a licensed or certified state, then that would provide you or make you an approved third party. If you're in an uncertified, unlicensed state, then that would happen jurisdiction by jurisdiction, and it would be up to the local code official.
Okay. This next question from Maria for Dave. I always close the door in the room I put the CRM in, say the bedroom. Is that recommended or wrong? Your opinion, please.
A bedroom has a sufficient volume that that would be a good practice. I don't see any issue with that. Normally, you want to test in the way that the home is used. So if that door gets closed when you're go to bed, then I think that makes fine sense. And there's nothing specific that I'm aware of in the measurement protocols that says anything about closing or opening doors, but certainly in small volumes like a closet would not be an appropriate place to even though the door is always closed, that's not an appropriate place to do the test. So I think you're okay, Marie.
Okay, and then another question from Carolyn. What does the code mean by, quote, where radon resistant new construction is required, unquote?
Yeah, because it's in the appendix, it is optional and it has to be adopted. Which actually interesting, I missed a slide, I think. There are 11 states that require RRNC, and that can either be done on an entire state level or it can be done on a zone 1 county level. And there are also 100 jurisdictions, which could be from a municipality to a township to a county, where they can adopt Appendix F. So it's not required everywhere, but where Appendix F is adopted, then that's why that language is in there. So you don't have to test if you don't have Appendix F adopted.
Okay, and there's one last question that was answered, but just to underscore, someone didn't catch what certification Dallas was referring to. And of course, he was referring to the new mitigation inspection certification. So that's it for the questions in the Whova Q&A. Do we have any other questions in the chat somewhere?
I just wanted to mention, Jane, this is Nicole, that Henry Schuver dropped off. I think he was dealing with a storm. And someone had a question in chat regarding Henry's session, whether or not there was a quiz question attached because it was so fast and full of info. There is no quiz question attached to Henry's presentation. So everyone can sigh relief, and we'll get a full slide deck from Henry as well, and have anyone's slide decks who want to share on our slide resource library on the website.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so it looks like we're running a few minutes ahead of schedule. Do we have any final questions?
Anybody know any songs?
Yeah, you want to hear one? No, I'm just kidding.
We have a sponsor, Marshall.
Do. So let's be sure to thank AirCheck, a Symposium Gold sponsor. Since 1985, AirCheck has been recognized in the radon industry not just as a well-respected provider of test devices and lab services, but also as a partner in promoting radon testing and radon awareness. If you haven't yet learned about AirCheck's custom programs for testing multifamily housing, schools, and large buildings, please be sure to visit the team in the Spruce Labs booth. All right, next up, this is always—
I've still got 22 pascals negative. I mimic a low wattage fan, like the smallest radon fans that aren't adjustable. And I've still got 12 pascals negative. So I'm like, okay, well, what if I just cut that in half? I've still got 6.5 pascals negative. So I'm like, okay, what does it take to get 2.5 pascals negative? And I turn it down until I've only got 1,500 or 15 hundredths of an inch of static pressure. You can barely see this on a YouTube manometer. So if I dialed a fan down to this level, you're not even going to be able to tell that the fan is on because it's such a small amount of static pressure. 5 CFM and 2.5 pascals negative. That's all I need to fix this basement. All of the rest of the air from my radon fan can go to, or all the rest of the capacity of the radon fan can go to the crawl space. So I can put a damper on this part of the radon, the basement part of the radon system, and send however much capacity I need to the crawl space now, and I can fix it all. The whole big 2,000 square foot crawl space plus the basement with a mid-range fan that's using 45-ish watts. So I go from needing 150 watts and pulling 140 CFM out of the house to only needing 5 CFM coming out of the basement. and I can use a total, including the crawl space, a total of 45-ish watts for the radon fan, and no air coming out of the house.
And how long did this take you to do this caulking to take these numbers?
Oh, the caulking, 10 and 15 minutes at the most.
10 to 15, yeah. So like this,
and that's probably mostly because I had to move a bunch of stuff around.
Oh, but you actually move stuff around to get behind it. That's good because
yeah, I didn't caulk up to the cardboard box and then go to the other side of the cardboard box and start again.
Okay, good, because we've seen that.
We have.
All right, so that's fascinating. So in your world, though, just when you typically core through your floor, you're hitting Clay, Tornadoes, and Dorothy in almost every house. But because this slab had settled, you had a big air gap between.
That's correct.
You use the caulking to seal the dime-sized plinko crack at the floor wall joint.
Right.
So you basically just put an airtight lid on this whole thing. You didn't even have to drill a suction point because you had ample air available to you.
I didn't have to dig a suction pit.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Right.
That's awesome.
So this is a fairly uncommon basement for us because we typically don't have that much settlement. So typically it takes us an inch to an inch and a half of static pressure to get this far across the basement. So in my world, we even though we work exclusively in tight soils, we never use high pressure fans.
I was going to ask that. Do you carry, you obviously have to have high pressure fans on your truck, but how often do you use them?
We do not carry a high pressure fan on our truck at all.
Fascinating.
So the last time I used a high pressure fan was on a commercial job. So we don't use them on residential jobs at all. Occasionally we have to put in a second suction point, but that's all.
But what better way to get your extension rather than overpowering one suction point? Just
absolutely.
All right.
Exactly.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to stop screen sharing and turn it over to you. I know that you've had some similar experiences. Let's see what you've got. How can you compare to this?
Well, it's actually similar, but it's new construction here. So we're going to talk a little bit about fan sizing for new construction and operating costs of fans. Come on, arrows, let's go. We don't got time. Here we go. All right, so suburban Minneapolis here. This home was built. It's a one-story, 2020 build. New construction, radon resistant new construction per Minnesota code, as it's been for 11 or 12 years. It's a pretty sizable footprint, almost 1,900 square foot. I was lucky enough to work with a very conscientious builder on this. And every new home in Minnesota actually is required to have a blower door test. In this particular house, a blower door test, the air exchange rate is 1.05 ACH, which is tight. One of the tighter houses that this particular building performance company had tested. In Minnesota, the energy code requires you to be less than 3 ACH. It's got all your new construction components, gravel bed, drain tile, and a 3-inch passive riser in that drain tile. So here is the floor plan. And as found, I've got 4 diagnostic test holes, 1 in each corner, basically. On the top, there are window wells, egress window wells. Those window wells don't drain to anything to the interior. They just drain in the soil out around the house. These are the numbers I found when I got there. So this is just the passive system operating. And as you can see, I'm positive everywhere. So clearly the passive system isn't working right here. And all these numbers are in pascals. And it's full basement. There's nothing else attached to this. There's no crawl space or anything like that. So clearly we need to activate this. So we did. Started with the mid-range fan because that's commonly what I see in a lot of new construction, unfortunately, because of the misnomer that the low wattage fans have a higher failure rate. So we've got some companies that don't even carry the low wattage fans, unfortunately. And so this is kind of a build to show them, listen, you're probably overkilling these things. So with the mid-range fan, as you can see in the lower left where the sump, that's where the sump pit is. And that's also where the passive system is going through the floor. Our static is about 106. We're flowing at 65 CFM, which you would expect given the mid-range fan, and I'm pulling 52 watts. So what do you think the annual operating cost is of this system?
About 50 bucks
50 bucks?
plus whatever, 50 bucks plus whatever air you're moving out of the house.
Sure. Okay, so let's make an assumption here that roughly 50 to 60% of the air is coming from the house. No matter how much sealing we can do, we're losing some air from the house. So plug it into our trusty little calculator here that Chad helped develop. Given the amount of airflow from the house, which is about 45 CFM, and for the Minneapolis heating days and cooling days, the furnace efficiency, the C rating of the AC unit, the cost of gas and electricity locally, the cost of added ventilation is $183 a year. Add on the wattage for the year, we're up to 236 bucks for this homeowner to pay every year to run this radon fan. And if you go back, do we need that much? No, we don't, not at all. We need like a tenth or less than that. So, all right, swap out to a low wattage fan. Low wattage fans still clearly kicking butt. We drop their flow, we drop their wattage. The operating cost for this one every year, assuming 20 CFM coming from the building, 82 bucks plus 18 is 100 bucks a year just to operate the low wattage radon fan. That's a much better palatable cost. Well, now we've got fans that are adjustable that can actually, well, they're low wattage, but they're even lower wattage. So I went in the attic and I dialed it down. I literally dialed it down till the point where it quit and then turned the knob ever so slightly until it kicked back on. This is the pressure field I got. My static pressure is only 6.5 pascals.
Holy smokes.
I'm moving 8 CFM.
So for where I'm at, if we have 5 pascals negative everywhere, that's twice as much as what we need. In Minnesota, you need a little bit more because it's colder, more stack effect, but that's incredible. At 8 CFM, okay, you got to tell me what's the wattage.
What do you think?
I mean, you can almost see the impeller moving when it's at 8 CFM. 2 watts?
2 watts.
Holy smokes.
2 watts of power pulling this off. All because a conscientious builder sealed everything he possibly could. And I double checked it, 2 watts. Okay, what does that equate to? If half the air is coming from the house at 4 CFM, 2 watts is $2 a year. This is $18 a year.
Okay, so you just went from over 250 with a standard mid-range fan. Okay, there we go.
So additional attention to detail could go a heck of a long way here, folks. Mid-range fans, while they're great, they have their place. You know, I could fix 80% of homes in my state with a mid-range fan. I prefer the low wattage versions because of the annual operating costs that are associated with these things. And not only annual operating costs, but someone's going to be paying for these fans to be running for 10 or 15 years. So just by going from mid-range to low wattage, you're saving $1,300, $1,400 over 10 years. That is an opportunity for mitigators to sell that to their clients. The radon isn't going to be any better reduced for the mid-range fan from low wattage fan. So, you know, a little bit more attention to detail, a little bit more sealing and diagnostics up front saves a ton of money in the end.
That's pretty incredible. I remember somebody did a presentation about new construction and they built their own fan. And after that, I was like, we need that. We need a fan that's smaller than the smallest fan. And fortunately now we've got it. That's awesome.
Yep.
2 watts.
The only thing though, so going back to here, and we got to wrap it up. I understand everyone. How do we add a system alarm to something like this?
That's a good question, because what's your static pressure? 6.5 pascals, which is
yes,
less than 1/10 of an inch of water column. That's really low.
So it's like we need something that can measure that low and reliably, because I do think moving forward there's going to be a niche market for this for sure.
Or we need something that's looking at the impeller on the fan or the amperage on the fan or something like that.
Yeah, something different than what we currently have. Something in addition to what we currently have would be great. So There we go.
think-
That's.
I think
that's
we're
what I
out.
wanted to pick apart.
We can't hear you. You must be muted.
There you go, Don.
Better, sorry. The cat is on my lap at the moment, so she's being a little disruptive. So thank you guys so much. You did a great job as always. So we're gonna start moving things over to the 4 o'clock. But before we do, it looks like we have a few questions. And Nicole, if I miss any, please let me know. So not sure, let's see. Bob Lewis is asking, how can you have 140 CFM and 3.4 on your water column?
Yeah, I think I answered that in the chat, but the new adjustable fans can have that kind of capacity.
Okay. All right. Things are kind of all over the place. Let me see. If we got any-
Josh asks, what types of soil are you running into?
Thank you, Nicole.
So for us, it's all clay soils. Josh, was that clay soils there at that house you were talking about?
No, that's new construction. Is gravel fill everywhere. So
Well, it's gravel, but gravel on top of what?
oh, that's a good question. Typically, we're
It's got to be something pretty tight, right?
it is pretty tight. It's topsoil, virgin topsoil. I mean, this used to be all grassland, and then we cultivated and cut out forest and grasslands. We cut it all down. We farmed it. We've been farming it for 400 years or whatever, but it's still there. You dig a hole and you're going to hit mostly dirt in this area where this house was built.
So Josh from the chat, as far as the geographic thing goes, yeah, absolutely. So in the middle of Kansas, where I'm at, we have fairly consistently clay soils. Where Josh Kerber is there in Minnesota, they can go from clay soils to loamy soils to glacial moraine. Josh, what else? I mean, you've got the whole gambit.
Yeah, we do. And it kind of depends what area of the state you're in. We do have pockets of karst. We've got a lot of glacial till all over. If you look outside and you see a hill in Minnesota, it's full of big giant rocks, bigger than my head, believe it or not.
That is hard to believe. That's a huge rock.
Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you very much. This is the end of day 2. Our attendees do have a number of options this evening for happy hours and things like that, but we do have chapter meetups and a happy hour at 4 o'clock back on the agenda. If you go to the 4 o'clock, 4:05 timeline, I think it spells it out in the description. There is a Zoom meetup URL. If you click on that in the description, and you might have received it in a Whova alert or a message from me about 2 hours ago with the Zoom link in that Whova alert. So go again. Thank you, gentlemen, very much. We appreciate your presentations as always. Dawn, thank you.
Yes, thank you too, Nicole. All right, we will see everybody bright and early tomorrow.
All righty. And tomorrow's exhibitor day. So.
Don't forget to vote.
Thank you, Amy. Yes, the poll closes tonight at midnight.
And
So
elections, midnight.
your ARS members, please go ahead and cast your votes. We'll see everybody tomorrow.
All righty. Thank you.
Thank you.